The sky above Zarian 5 glimmered with thousands of stars, each one a silent witness to the life below. The planet had always been quiet, calm, and filled with the gentle hum of ordinary living. Farmers tended their fields, children ran laughing through the streets of small towns, and the elders spoke in soft, patient voices about the days when the world seemed endless and kind. But on this night, the stars felt different. Something heavy pressed down on the horizon, a shadow that stretched across the planet like a storm. From the depths of space, the Empire had arrived. Their ships were massive, dark, and unfeeling, casting long, oppressive shadows over the cities below. They moved with precision, their engines silent until the last moment, and then the ground seemed to tremble as they descended. Zarian 5 had never known war. The people had read about battles in old stories, heard whispers of distant worlds conquered and civilizations crushed, but this was different. This was real. And it was imminent. In the capital city of Verida, people gathered in the streets, staring up at the enormous vessels hovering above. Their lights glowed cold and uninviting, reflecting off the glass towers and metal domes. The Imperial ships were not just war machines, they were symbols of power, dominance, and the expectation of total submission. Kel stood on the highest terrace of the capital's central tower. His dark eyes, usually calm and thoughtful, burned with a mixture of fear and determination. He was young, barely 30 cycles old, but already he had seen more hardship than most of his people would face in a lifetime. And now, as he looked at the Empire's fleet, he knew that Zarian 5's fate was uncertain. The Imperial Herald's voice echoed across the city. It was amplified, metallic, and completely devoid of empathy. People of Zarian 5, it said, your world is now under the gaze of the Empire. Submission is expected. Resistance will be met with immediate destruction. You have 2 cycles to comply. A murmur spread through the crowd. Some turned away, eyes wet with fear, clutching their children close. Others fell to their knees, praying for mercy. But Kyle did not move. His jaw tightened. The words of the herald were meant to break the spirit of the planet, to make them bow without a fight. But Kyle refused to be broken. He descended from the tower and walked through the streets. The air smelled of ozone and distant fire. Citizens stared at him with a mix of hope and doubt. Many had known Kyle since childhood, admired him for his fairness, his courage, and the way he listened to people rather than orders. Now they looked to him with unspoken questions. Can we survive this? Kyle stopped in front of the largest square in the city. It was filled with rubble from old construction projects, broken tools, and the remnants of market stalls. To anyone else it would have seemed useless, a place too small to matter. But Kale saw possibility. Listen to me, he called, raising his voice so it carried over the whispers of fear. The crowd fell silent. Even the wind seemed to pause, as if waiting for what he would say. The Empire expects us to bow, Kyle said, his voice firm but filled with passion. They believe we are weak, that we will tremble and surrender our homes without a fight. But we are not weak. We are Zarian 5. We are not just our cities, our streets, or our tools. We are our courage. We are the fire in our hearts. They may have their machines, their weapons, and their numbers, but we have something they will never understand: our will to survive and our love for this world. A wave of quiet energy passed through the people. Some lifted their heads, eyes shining with a faint spark of hope. Children stopped crying, and elders straightened their backs, as if Kale's words had reminded them of a truth they had forgotten. We will not surrender, he shouted. We will fight. Even if the Empire comes with 1,000 ships, we will stand. For our families, for our homes, and for the future of Zarian 5. For a moment, it was as if the city itself held its breath. Then the first cheers broke out, low at first, hesitant but growing louder. Soon the entire square was filled with the sounds of determination. Farmers, merchants, builders, and teachers, all ordinary people, raised their voices together. We will not surrender, they cried. and Kyle felt a lump rise in his throat. That night, Kyle walked among the people, speaking to them quietly, individually, finding the strength in each person. He talked to mothers, promising to protect their children. He spoke with elders, seeking wisdom from their long lives. He trained young men and women to fight, not with the skills of the Empire, but with knowledge of their land, their forests, and their mountains. Every plan, every word, and every promise carried hope, and slowly, fear began to give way to courage. Above the city, the Empire's ships gleamed, cold and unyielding. They expected Zarian 5 to crumble beneath them, to bend without a fight. But the people of the planet had already chosen a different path. They would stand. They would resist, and in that choice they found a strength far greater than any weapon the Empire could wield. Kale looked up at the stars, his hands clenched into fists. He whispered softly, almost to himself, "Let them come. We are ready." And no darkness, no matter how vast, can snuff out the fire of a people who refuse to bow. And in that moment, as the night wrapped around the city, Zarian 5 braced itself. Not with despair, but with defiance. The Empire expected submission, but the people were already preparing to fight. The days following the Empire's arrival were tense. The sky remained dark with the massive warships hovering above, their shadows casting fear across the cities, forests, and plains of Zarian 5. Yet, beneath the fear, something new was beginning, something that the Empire had never expected. Resistance. Kale moved through the streets like a quiet storm. He spoke to the people of Verida, not as a commander issuing orders, but as one of them, sharing their fears, their hopes, and their determination. Farmers who had never held a weapon heavier than a plow, now trained with spears, bows, and makeshift armor. Builders who had only known hammers and nails studied tactics, learning how to strike quickly and vanish into the shadows. Teachers taught children the maps of the land, the hidden paths, and the safest routes, turning innocence into survival skills. The people were ordinary, yet their hearts carried extraordinary courage. Kyle watched as a young girl, no more than 12 cycles old, lifted a wooden practice sword with a determination that rivaled trained soldiers. She looked at him with fierce eyes. "I want to fight for my home," she said, her voice steady. Kyle knelt before her, seeing not fear, but fire. "You will fight," he said. "But courage alone is not enough. You must also protect others. Your bravery will light the way for your friends and family." The elders of the city gathered secretly in the abandoned council hall. Their voices trembled at first, but soon grew strong as they planned strategies. They knew the Empire would strike with overwhelming force, yet they also knew their people understood the land in ways the invaders could never comprehend. Hills, forests, rivers, and caves became allies. Traps were built along supply routes. Hidden passages connected villages. Every stone, every tree, every river bend was a weapon in their hands. Kyle met with the elders late one night. Moonlight spilled through broken windows, illuminating maps marked with chalk and careful handwriting. "They think fear will bend us," Kale said, pointing to the position of the Empire's fleet. "But they underestimate the fire that burns in our hearts. Every act of courage, every moment we resist will teach them something they cannot calculate." An elder shook his head, worry etched in deep lines. "We are not soldiers. They will destroy everything." Kale's eyes softened. "Perhaps. But if we do not fight, they will take everything anyway. And if we fight, even if we fall, we will fall as people who refuse to bow. That is worth more than a life lived in chains." Word of the resistance spread quickly. Messengers carried the news to distant villages, and soon, people were organizing themselves into units. Farmers became scouts. Builders became engineers, designing clever mechanisms to slow down the invaders. Children, guided carefully, became eyes in the sky, watching for the slightest movement of the Empire's forces. The spirit of Zarian 5 was rising, and with it the first sparks of hope. Meanwhile, the Empire observed silently. From their immense command ships, Generals scowled at the reports. "They are resisting," one said, voice low with disbelief. "Their technology is primitive. Their weapons are weak. Why are they still fighting?" Another commander laughed, bitterly. "Fear should have bent them long ago, yet they persist. It is frustrating." Kale did not care about the Empire's confusion. His focus was on the people. He spent nights training volunteers in secret, teaching them to move quickly, strike decisively, and retreat without leaving traces. Every citizen who joined learned the importance of protecting not just themselves, but one another. One evening, Kyle stood on a ridge overlooking the capital. The Empire's ships glowed like cold stars above, casting long shadows across the plains. Yet below him, the people moved like quiet, determined shadows themselves, preparing for the inevitable clash. Kale felt a mixture of fear and pride swell within him. "They think they can break us," he whispered to the wind. "But courage is not something you destroy. It grows stronger with every attempt to crush it." That night, he addressed a gathering in the central square. Thousands had come, young and old, fearful and brave, yet all united by the same determination. "The Empire believes we will bow," Kale said, his voice carrying over the quiet city. "They think we are weak, but every heartbeat, every act of courage, proves them wrong. We fight not because we want war, but because we refuse to let our homes be taken, our children enslaved, and our freedom stolen. Stand with me. Stand with your families. Stand for Zarion 5. A roar rose from the crowd. The sound was not just anger or fear or defiance, it was hope made audible. It was the sound of ordinary people realizing their extraordinary power. Kale smiled, tears stinging his eyes as he saw parents, farmers, builders, and children all united. They were no longer just citizens, they were warriors of their home, bearers of a fire the Empire could not extinguish. In the dark sky above, the Empire's ships seemed more distant somehow, as if the courage of a single planet could push back against the cold metal of the galaxy's mightiest fleet. And on the ground, Kale knew that the spark of resistance had become a flame, burning brighter with every heartbeat. Zarion 5 would not surrender. Not tonight. Not ever. The people of Zarion 5 were ready to fight. The Empire expected fear, but they would face defiance. And in that defiance lay the promise of something far greater than victory or defeat, the survival of a spirit that refused to bow. The first attack came at dawn. The sky above Zarion 5 was painted with streaks of red and gold, but the beauty of the sunrise was shattered by the cold metallic glint of the Empire's ships. They descended like giants of shadow, their engines humming with an almost alive menace. The ground trembled as massive walkers touched down near the city outskirts, sending dust and debris into the air. Kale stood at the edge of the city, his cloak fluttering in the wind, watching the invaders. Fear clawed at his chest, but he refused to show it. Around him, the people he had trained, the farmers, builders, teachers, and children, stood ready, their weapons crude but their determination fierce. "This is it," Kale whispered, more to himself than anyone else. "Our first test." The Empire's soldiers moved methodically, expecting the city to crumble before them. Their weapons were precise, their armor nearly indestructible, and their minds trained for one purpose: to dominate and destroy. But Zarion 5 was different. Its people did not rely on technology or numbers. They relied on heart, on ingenuity, and on each other. Kyle gave a small nod and the fight began. The resistance struck with swift, calculated moves. Scouts led the Imperial forces into narrow alleys and hidden traps. Farmers toppled barriers and ignited hidden charges, slowing the Empire's advance. Children acted as messengers, darting between units with intelligence no machine could match. Each action, each small victory filled the defenders with courage. Kale led a unit toward one of the Empire's forward outposts. The soldiers there were confident, almost arrogant, but Kale's people were relentless. They knew the land, every rock and tree, and they used it to their advantage. With clever feints and traps, they created confusion among the invaders. The first clash was chaotic, violent, and full of tension. Kyle felt his heart hammering in, his chest as he faced the soldiers. They were stronger, faster, and better equipped. But he fought not just for survival, but for the lives of every person behind him. He met an Imperial commander in the streets, a towering figure clad in black steel. The clash of their weapons rang like thunder across the city. The commander was skilled, precise, and merciless. But Cale's strength came from something the Empire could not calculate: resolve. Every strike he made was fueled by love for his people, for his home, and for the children who would inherit this planet. Around him, his people fought with everything they had. A mother used her sling to strike a soldier from behind. A teacher blocked a blast with nothing but a reinforced shield, and children lured enemies into traps with clever tricks. Fear existed, yes, but it was drowned out by a force stronger than a determination. The Empire had expected fear. They had expected the planet to bend. But every time their soldiers fell to the resourcefulness of the people, their confidence wavered. Panic, confusion, and frustration began to seep into their ranks. Kyle could see it in their eyes. They had never faced a population that fought with such courage and unity. Hours passed, and the battle raged on. Buildings were scarred, streets torn apart, and fires lit the horizon. Yet the people of Zarion 5 refused to retreat. They moved like shadows, striking where the Empire least expected, disappearing before retaliation could come. Kyle felt exhaustion claw at him, but he pressed forward, knowing that the moment they faltered, everything could be lost. Finally, after what seemed like endless hours, Kyle faced the Imperial commander once more. This time, their fight was no longer just physical. It was a clash of spirit. Kale's blade moved not just with skill, but with emotion, with the weight of a people who would not submit. And slowly, methodically, the commander faltered, surprised by the strength and courage of someone he deemed inferior. As the commander fell, the Empire's forces began to withdraw, regrouping for the next strike. Zarion 5 had survived the first wave, but at a cost. Smoke filled the streets. Buildings smoldered, and the wounded cried for help. Kale knelt beside one of his fallen friends, a young farmer who had fought bravely until the last breath. "Your courage will never be forgotten," Kale whispered, feeling tears sting his eyes. "We fight for you. We fight for everyone." Despite the devastation, a sense of triumph hung in the air. The people of Zarion 5 had proven something incredible, that courage, unity, and love for one's home could defy even the most powerful empire in the galaxy. The first clash had been bloody and terrifying, but it had also awakened something new, a belief that they could stand, that they could resist, and that they could survive. Kale looked toward the horizon, where the Empire's fleet glimmered coldly against the morning sun. "This is only the beginning," he said quietly. "They thought we would bow. They thought fear would control us. But we are Zarion 5, and we will not fall so easily." In the hearts of every survivor, the fire of defiance burned brighter than ever. The Empire expected submission, but the people had chosen conflict. And with that choice came hope, courage, and the first glimmer of victory. The Empire did not take defeat lightly. Reports from the first clash reached the high command, and for the first time in centuries a hint of doubt crept into the minds of generals. They had faced countless worlds, crushed civilizations, and demanded obedience with unflinching certainty. Yet Zarion 5 had resisted. They had fought back, inflicted losses, and even dared to defeat their soldiers in the streets of the capital. On board the flagship hovering above Verita, the High Commander's eyes narrowed. "This is unexpected," he muttered, voice low and dangerous. "They are ordinary people, yet they fight as if the very stars themselves guide them. Prepare a full assault, leave nothing standing, make them bend or destroy them completely." Meanwhile, Kale and the people of Zarion 5 worked tirelessly. The first clash had shown them the Empire's strength, but it had also shown them their own courage. They repaired buildings, tended the wounded, and gathered supplies. Every citizen knew the danger looming in the sky, yet no one surrendered to fear. Instead, they adapted. Civilians became scouts. Builders strengthened barricades. Children memorized paths, ready to guide defenders or lead enemies into traps. Kyle met with the city's leaders late at night in a ruined council hall. Moonlight spilled through broken windows, illuminating maps and schematics. "They will come again," he said, his voice steady but heavy. "Stronger, smarter, but we know their patterns. We know our land, and we have something they cannot calculate: courage, unity, and the will to protect our homes." An elder placed a hand on Kale's shoulder, worry etched in deep lines. "We have strength, yes, but their power is immense. One mistake, and our people will die." Kyle nodded, meeting the elder's gaze. "Perhaps, but if we do nothing, every life is already lost. Standing, fighting, protecting each other. That is how we survive. That is how we win, even if the cost is high." As dawn broke the next day, the Empire returned. This time their assault was massive. Dozens of ships cast shadows over the city, their engines shaking the ground. Armored walkers advanced in unison, weapons raised, ready to crush resistance. At the first sign of defiance, their expectation was clear. This time Zarion 5 would fall. But Kale had prepared. Civilians moved to hidden shelters while defenders took positions along narrow alleys, hidden trenches, and forests at the city's edges. The land itself became a weapon. Logs, stones, and traps slowed the Empire's march. Ambushes struck from above and below, catching soldiers off guard. For every move the Empire made, Zarion 5 had a counter. The battle was chaotic, violent, and desperate. Kyle fought in the streets, side by side with neighbors he had known since childhood. Every step carried risk. Every strike could be the last. Yet in the midst of chaos, something remarkable happened. The Empire faltered. Their confidence, once absolute, began to crumble. They could not understand a population that refused to die quietly, that fought not for conquest, but for love of home, family, and freedom. Kale paused on a ridge, watching the Empire's massive walkers stumble into ambushes. He saw farmers pulling levers that topple to massive beams onto armored soldiers. Builders hurled fire and smoke into corridors, slowing the advance. Children ran messages, alerting units to enemy movements. Even the elderly, too weak for combat, guided younger fighters, reminding them of hidden paths and secret routes. The Empire's soldiers began to doubt themselves. They had trained to obey, to dominate, to inspire fear. And yet here on Zarion 5, ordinary people defied their expectations. Panic crept into the ranks. Orders were delayed. Confusion spread. A sense of unease, foreign to the Imperial Army, began to take root. Kale pressed forward into the heart of the city, striking alongside his people wherever the Empire's power seemed greatest. Each clash was brutal and the cost was high. Buildings burned, streets cracked. Children and adults alike faced danger with bravery that defied their years and experience. Every life lost was mourned, yet every act of courage became a rallying cry. By the end of the day, the Empire had retreated, regrouping beyond the city limits. Zarion 5 had survived, but at a heavy cost. Smoke rose from the streets, and the wounded groaned under the care of medics and volunteers. Kale knelt beside a fallen fighter, a young scout who had led a successful ambush but would never see another sunrise. "Your bravery saved countless lives," Kyle whispered, tears stinging his eyes. "We fight because of you. We survive because of you." The people of Zarion 5 were battered and bruised, yet their spirit remained unbroken. They had faced the Empire's wrath and endured, proving that courage and unity could stand against even the greatest power in the galaxy. As night fell over the city, Kale stood on the central tower once more. The stars shone above, distant and indifferent, yet they seemed brighter somehow, reflecting the fire that now burned within every citizen. "They will come again," Kale murmured, voice firm. "But they will find us ready, stronger, united. And this time, they will remember that Zarion 5 does not bend." For the Empire, the world had been just another conquest to be taken with force. For Zarion 5, it had become a test of courage, love, and the unbreakable human spirit. And the people had passed. The spark of resistance had grown into a roaring flame, lighting the hearts of ordinary people who were no longer afraid. And in that flame lay the promise of defiance, hope, and a fight that would not end until the Empire understood one truth. Zarion 5 would never submit. The Empire's fleet lingered above Zarion 5, massive and unyielding. Every ship gleamed like cold steel in the starlight, a reminder of the vast power waiting to crush the planet. The people of Verita were exhausted, their bodies bruised and torn, yet their spirit burned brighter than ever. They had survived wave after wave of attacks, proving that courage could stand against even the mightiest force in the galaxy. Kale knew that the final battle would not come in the streets, forests, or mountains. It would come in the heart of the Empire itself, their flagship. The massive vessel hung above the city, nearly eclipsing the sun, its engines pulsing with a menacing rhythm. The High Commander would not relent until Zarion 5 was crushed, and Kale understood that if they were to survive, they had to strike at the source of the threat. Under the cover of night, Kale assembled a small strike team. Each member was a citizen, not a soldier, yet each had proven themselves fearless. Scouts, builders, and fighters moved silently through shadows and across the terrain, avoiding patrols and slipping past defenses with careful precision. Every step carried risk, yet every step was fueled by determination and love for their home. As they approached the flagship, the immense size of the vessel became clear. Its hull glimmered coldly under the moonlight, massive doors and energy fields sealing its secrets. Inside, countless soldiers moved with precision, unaware of the threat approaching from below. Kale took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his responsibility. "We are not just fighting for ourselves," he whispered to the team. "We fight for everyone who believes in freedom, for everyone who refuses to bend." Let this be the moment they understand the courage of Zarion 5. They infiltrated the flagship with ingenuity rather than brute force. Hidden passages, ventilation shafts, and abandoned maintenance corridors became their paths. Every move required precision, timing, and nerves of steel. The soldiers inside were trained to expect attacks in the open, not cunning strikes in the shadows. With each careful step, Kale felt hope grow. They were ordinary people, yet they were capable of extraordinary things. Finally, they reached the core of the ship where the High Commander awaited. The chamber was immense, walls lined with cold metal and glowing energy conduits. The Commander's armor gleamed black and silver, his presence radiating authority and power. He did not flinch at the sight of Kale and his team. Instead, his eyes narrowed and a cruel smile crossed his face. "You dare enter my ship?" he said, voice echoing like steel. "Ordinary people cannot stop the Empire." Kyle stepped forward, heart pounding but resolve unshaken. "We are not ordinary," he replied. "We fight for our home. We fight for our people, and we will not bow." The fight that followed was brutal. The Commander was skilled and ruthless, striking with precision and strength that Kale had never faced. Yet Kale fought with something the Empire could never calculate: emotion. Every swing of his weapon, every dodge and counter, carried the weight of thousands of lives, the love of his family, and the hope of a people who refused to surrender. Around them, the strike team disabled critical systems, causing alarms to blare and energy conduits to spark. They were ordinary citizens performing extraordinary acts, turning the ship's own strength against it. Soldiers pursued them, but they moved with agility and cunning, striking quickly and vanishing into the shadows. As Kale clashed with the High Commander, he realized something crucial. This battle was not just physical, it was a test of spirit. The Commander wielded power and technology, but Kyle wielded courage and unity, the invisible force that bound his people together. With a final surge of strength, he disarmed the Commander, sending his weapon clattering across the metal floor. The Commander fell to his knees, disbelief flashing in his eyes. Outside, the people of Zarion 5 launched a coordinated strike against the Empire's remaining forces. Using the knowledge of their land, they hit supply lines, ambushed retreating soldiers, and created chaos within the ranks. The Empire, once confident and unyielding, now tasted fear for the first time. Their soldiers were disoriented, their ships vulnerable, and their morale shattered. Kel stood in the chamber, breathing heavily, eyes meeting the fallen commander. "This is our home," he said softly, voice steady and filled with conviction, "and no empire, no matter how vast, can take it from us as long as we refuse to bow." The flagship shuddered violently as its systems failed. Sparks flew, alarms wailed, and the immense ship began to tilt. Cale and his team raced to escape as the vessel crashed into the plains outside the city. The ground shook with the impact, sending debris flying into the sky. The Empire's forces, witnessing the destruction of their flagship, began to retreat in confusion and fear. Zarion 5 had survived the heart of the storm. Its people had struck at the core of the Empire itself and emerged victorious, proving that courage, unity, and determination could triumph over even the greatest power in the galaxy. Kyle looked over the battlefield, seeing smoke rise from the plains and fires burning in the distance. He knew the cost had been high, but he also knew that the people had proven something extraordinary. They could face the impossible and endure. That night, as stars reflected off the damaged city and smoldering plains, Cale spoke to his team. "We have turned the tide," he said quietly. "But this is not the end. The Empire will return. Yet they will never forget one thing. The people of Zarion 5 do not bow. They do not fear. They fight." And in that moment, under the quiet light of distant stars, the people of Zarion 5 felt a truth stronger than any weapon. Even against an empire, courage and unity could not be defeated. The morning after the flagship crashed, Zarion 5 was quiet in a way that felt strange and fragile. The smoke from burning streets and shattered buildings rose in thin plumes, carrying with it the scent of fire, dust, and loss. The city was battered, the fields torn, and homes reduced to rubble, but amid the destruction, life persisted. Survivors emerged cautiously from shelters, helping the wounded, carrying water and tending to those who had fought with courage and paid the price. Cale walked through the streets, observing the aftermath. His heart was heavy with grief. Friends, neighbors, and even children had fallen in the fight for freedom. The cost had been enormous, yet the people still moved with determination. Each survivor bore scars, but their eyes held the same fire that had refused to bow before the Empire. He knelt beside a young man barely old enough to shave, who had been wounded while helping a fallen comrade. "You've done more than you know," Kyle said, pressing a hand to the boy's shoulder. "Every life you protect, every action you take keeps this world alive. You are the strength of Zarion 5. Across the city, families reunited. Tears flowed freely. Tears of sorrow, yes, but also of relief and pride. The people had survived against impossible odds. They had faced the might of the greatest empire in the galaxy and lived to see another sunrise. It was a victory built on courage, sacrifice, and unwavering unity. Cale climbed to the highest terrace in Verita to address the PO. Pull. Thousands gathered, eyes filled with grief, exhaustion, and hope. The city, though scarred, had become a symbol of resilience. "Today, we mourn," Cale began, voice steady yet heavy with emotion. "We mourn those who gave everything for our home, but we also stand here because of them. They fought not in vain. They fought because they believed in something greater than themselves, the freedom of Zarion 5 and the courage of its people." He looked across the crowd, seeing mothers holding children tightly, elders nodding with pride, and young warriors standing tall despite their injuries. "We have survived," he continued. "We have shown the Empire that fear alone cannot conquer a people united by love, courage, and hope. Our losses are great, but our spirit is stronger. Every life lost strengthens our determination. Every scar tells a story of defiance, and every heart still beating carries the flame of freedom. The people cheered, some raising fists, others weeping openly. The sound was raw and powerful, a testament to resilience forged in fire. Kyle knew that the battle had not been without cost. Families had been shattered. Friends had been lost. But he also knew that Zarion 5 had emerged from the crucible of war, stronger and more united than ever. Outside the city, the plains bore the marks of the Empire's retreat. Smoke curled from abandoned ships, and scattered soldiers fled across the terrain, unsure how to face a people who had defied their expectations so completely. Zarion 5 had won not through superior technology or overwhelming force, but through heart, ingenuity, and the refusal to surrender. Kale walked among the people, helping lift fallen debris, encouraging the injured, and comforting those who mourned. Every step he took reminded him that victory was never free, and courage always carried a price. Yet in every hand that gripped another, every voice that sang in defiance, every tear and smile, he saw proof of something greater than any empire, the unbreakable spirit of a people who fight for their home. As the sun began to rise, the city glowed with a fragile beauty. Smoke and fire reflected gold and crimson, giving the ruined streets an almost sacred light. Kale stood in the central square, raising his voice once more. "We have fought together," he said. "We have endured together, and though the scars of battle will remain, so too will the knowledge that we are never alone. Zarion 5 is alive because of each of us. Every life, every act of courage has shaped the future. We are a people who will not bend, will not fear, and will never surrender." Children played cautiously among the ruins, their laughter fragile but bright. Parents watched them, tears streaked across their faces, knowing that the fight had been for this moment, the chance for the next generation to live free, to grow, and to dream without the shadow of empire looming overhead. Kyle looked toward the horizon where the remaining Empire ships had retreated. He knew they would return, that the threat was not gone forever. But he also knew something far more important. The people of Zarion 5 had discovered a power greater than any weapon. It was courage, unity, and the willingness to fight for what was right. The Empire had expected submission, but it had faced something far stronger, the unbreakable heart of an entire world. And in that heart lay hope. Hope that would carry Zarion 5 through the long nights ahead. Hope that would ensure that no matter the darkness, the people would rise. And hope that would remind the galaxy that courage and unity could never be conquered. The sun rose over Zarion 5, painting the scarred city of Verida in shades of gold and crimson. Smoke from the battle still lingered in the streets, curling into the sky like dark ribbons. Broken buildings and scorched fields bore silent witness to the struggle that had shaken the planet to its core. Yet amid the destruction, life stirred. Birds sang hesitantly from charred trees. Children crept out to play among the ruins, laughter mingling with cautious whispers. And the people, battered but unbroken, began to rebuild. Kyle stood at the highest tower in the city, looking over the streets below. His heart was heavy with grief for those they had lost, yet filled with pride for those who had survived. Every face in the crowd told a story of bravery, of sacrifice, of a spirit that refused to yield. The Empire had expected fear, submission, and obedience. Instead, it had found something far more dangerous: courage, unity, and an unbreakable will. He climbed down to the central square where the people of Verida had gathered. Mothers clutched children close, fathers held hands with neighbors, and the elderly stood tall despite their scars. Kale's voice rang out, carrying across the square, steady and full of emotion. "The Empire expected us to bow," he said. "They thought our courage would crumble in the face of their might. But we have shown them the truth. The spirit of Zarion 5 cannot be broken. We fight not because we hate them, but because we love our home, our families, and our freedom. And that love, that courage, will always endure." A cheer rose from the crowd, tentative at first, then growing louder, stronger. It was a sound that carried hope, resilience, and the promise of a future reclaimed. Kale felt a lump in his throat. They had survived the impossible. They had faced an empire that had conquered countless worlds, and yet, here they were, standing, proud and alive. The people began to clear the streets, rebuilding what they could. Children helped carry stones. Farmers repaired damaged fields. Builders reconstructed walls and homes. Every small act of labor was an act of defiance, a declaration that life would continue despite the scars of war. And through it all, Kale walked among them, offering words of encouragement, tending to the wounded, and sharing in the quiet triumph of survival. Even as the people worked, Kale's thoughts drifted to those who would never see another sunrise. Friends, soldiers, children, so many had given everything for the world they loved. He knelt beside a charred wall where a fallen fighter had held the line. "You will not be forgotten," he whispered. "Your courage lives in every heart here. We fight because of you, and we will rebuild because of you." Outside the city, the remnants of the Empire's fleet glimmered far above the horizon, retreating into the darkness of space. Their ships had failed to crush the spirit of Zarion 5, and for the first time the galaxy would remember this world, not as a planet to be conquered, but as a people who would never bow. Kale turned back to the crowd. The people of Zarion 5 were weary, yet their eyes shone with determination. Every scar, every tear, every victory had forged a bond stronger than steel. They had learned that courage was contagious, that hope could survive even in the darkest hour, and that unity could stand against forces larger than the mind could comprehend. He raised his hand, signaling for silence. The square fell quiet, the only sound the soft wind moving through broken streets. "We are Zarion 5, he said, voice echoing across the city. "And though we have faced darkness, we have not faltered. Though we have known loss, we have found strength. And though the Empire may return, we will always stand. For courage, for unity, for freedom. This is our world, and it belongs to those who dare to protect it." The people cheered again, louder this time, voices blending into a chorus that carried beyond the city, over the plains, and toward the distant stars. It was the sound of defiance, of life, and of hope reborn. Kale smiled, tears glinting in the sunlight, knowing that the battle had ended not with destruction, but with a victory of spirit. As evening approached, the citizens of Zarion 5 lit fires across the city, small beacons that illuminated the night and celebrated survival. Families gathered, sharing meals, stories, and quiet laughter. Children slept safely in the arms of their parents, dreaming of a future that had been won through bravery and sacrifice. Kale climbed to the top of the central tower one last time that night. The stars above shone coldly, yet they reflected a warmth that matched the fires below. He thought of the battles fought, the friends lost, and the courage that had carried them through. He knew the Empire might return, that darkness would always lurk among the stars. But he also knew a truth stronger than any weapon. A people who fight with heart, unity, and love can never be conquered. And so, Zarion 5 began a new chapter. A chapter not written by fear or submission, but by courage, sacrifice, and the indomitable spirit of a people who refused to bow. The Empire had expected obedience, yet it had found defiance. It had expected submission, yet it had faced life itself, the life of a world united by hope, love, and the fire that burns within every human heart. Under the light of a new dawn, Kale whispered softly to the stars, "We will stand, we will endure, and we will never bow." And in the hearts of every citizen, that promise burned brighter than any empire, stronger than any weapon, and eternal as the stars above.